Here's a full 1600-word article crafted for your YouTube story based on the title you provided. I've kept it without headings, written in a flowing, cinematic, and emotional storytelling style, perfect for narration. The conference room was suffocatingly silent. The long oak table was scattered with documents, laptops, and half-empty cups of coffee that had long since gone cold. The tension was so thick that even the hum of the air conditioner seemed intrusive. At the head of the table sat Ethan Hayes, a man in his mid-30s, with a chiseled jawline, weary eyes, and a presence that commanded respect. He wasn't just any CEO, he was a single father who had built his company from the ground up after tragedy had reshaped his life. But now, he was facing a crisis so grave that even the best minds money could buy had failed to solve it. 12 consultants, highly paid, highly reputed, and flown in from across the country, had spent weeks analyzing numbers, drafting plans, and presenting complex solutions to the problem threatening Ethan's empire. Yet one by one, they had failed. Their strategies were rejected not because they were lazy, but because none of them truly addressed the heart of the issue. Frustration grew, voices rose, and egos clashed until, at last, they walked away. They left behind a defeated silence and a man staring at the wreckage of his dreams. Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbed his temples, and thought of his little daughter, Mia. She was 7 years old, with big brown eyes and a laugh that could light up even the darkest night. She was the reason he kept fighting, the reason he hadn't given up when life had taken his wife in a car accident years ago. Everything he did was for her future, for her happiness. But now, with the company on the brink of collapse, Ethan feared he might not be able to keep the promise he had made to his daughter, that no matter what, he would always protect her world. As he sat in despair, the door creaked open. A young man in a faded janitor's uniform stepped in, pushing a mop bucket. His name was Daniel, barely in his 20s, quiet and unnoticed most of the time. He came from a modest background, working night shifts while attending community college during the day. He had dreams, too, though no one in that boardroom had ever cared to ask about them. Ethan glanced at him but said nothing. Daniel should have been invisible in a room like this. But instead of leaving quickly, the janitor paused, his eyes scanning the chaotic mess of documents scattered on the table. For a moment, he hesitated, and then, almost shyly, he spoke. "Sir, excuse me," Daniel said softly, his voice almost trembling, "but I couldn't help overhearing some of the conversations earlier. May I try something?" The room, though nearly empty, felt as though ghosts of the departed consultants still lingered. Ethan looked at him with a mixture of exhaustion and curiosity. He wanted to dismiss him, to wave him off, but something in the young man's eyes stopped him. They weren't the eyes of someone trying to impress, but of someone who genuinely wanted to help. Ethan gestured for him to continue. Daniel set aside his mop, walked to the table, and glanced at the piles of data. He didn't touch the complex graphs or long reports. Instead, he picked up a marker and walked to the whiteboard. With surprising confidence, he began drawing simple circles, arrows, and numbers. His approach was so stripped down, so elementary, that Ethan almost laughed, until the meaning clicked. In less than a minute, Daniel had mapped out the problem in a way no one else had. The consultants had buried themselves in complexity, blinded by jargon and prestige. But Daniel cut through it all with simplicity and clarity. He showed that the company didn't need a massive restructuring or millions in investments. The problem boiled down to a single overlooked bottleneck in operations, something small but critical that, once fixed, would save the company not only millions but its reputation as well. Ethan's eyes widened as he watched the janitor explain with passion and honesty. The young man's solution was elegant, practical, and brilliant. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in the CEO's heart. When Daniel finished, silence filled the room. Ethan leaned forward, staring at the whiteboard, then back at the janitor. "You solved what 12 experts couldn't," he said, his voice low with astonishment. "How did you see this?" Daniel shrugged, a bit embarrassed. "I've been cleaning these rooms for months, sir. I listen while people talk. I don't understand all the fancy terms, but sometimes, when you stand outside the storm, you see things clearer. I just thought, what if the answer wasn't as complicated as everyone made it?" Ethan stood up, walked over, and placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. There was no arrogance in the young man's face, only humility. And in that moment, Ethan saw something he hadn't seen in any of those consultants: honesty without ego. The CEO smiled faintly, though emotion threatened to break his composure. "Daniel, you just saved this company. But more than that, You reminded me why I started it in the first place. Not to impress the world. Not to build monuments of pride. But to create something real, something that matters. And you did that today. Word spread quickly through the company. Employees who had been anxious and disheartened now felt a surge of hope. The janitor who had always been overlooked became the quiet hero. And for Ethan, the lesson was profound. Wisdom can come from anywhere, even from the humblest of voices. But Ethan wasn't done. The next morning, he called Daniel into his office. The young man looked nervous, clutching his cap in his hands, unsure why the CEO would summon him. Ethan gestured for him to sit. You're not just a janitor anymore, Ethan said firmly. From today forward, I want you on my team. I'm offering you a full scholarship to finish your studies, and when you're done, I want you to come back here and work with me, not as staff, but as a leader. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He had never dared to dream so big. For him, this wasn't just an opportunity, it was life-changing. He stood, unable to find the right words, and simply whispered, "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." As weeks turned into months, Daniel's simple but genius insight was implemented, and the company thrived. Profits grew, employees flourished, and Ethan's promise to his daughter felt secure once again. But more than business, something deeper had been restored. Faith in people, faith in humility, and faith in the truth that sometimes the greatest wisdom lies in the simplest of hearts. One evening, Ethan sat with his daughter Mia on the balcony of their home. The city lights sparkled in the distance as she leaned against him. "Daddy," she asked curiously, "why are you smiling so much lately?" Ethan kissed her forehead and replied, "Because I was reminded of something very important, sweetheart. Never judge people by their titles or appearances. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one who holds the answers we need the most." Mia thought about it for a moment, then smiled. "Like superheroes, they don't always wear capes." Ethan chuckled softly. "Exactly, my love, sometimes, they carry mops." The story of the young janitor and the single dad CEO became something whispered through corporate circles. Not as a tale of corporate strategy, but as a story of humanity, humility, and the reminder that brilliance is not reserved for the powerful. It can come from anyone, anywhere, if only we are willing to listen. For Daniel, life changed forever. He graduated with honors, returned to the company, and became one of its brightest minds. But no matter how far he rose, he never forgot where he came from. He carried with him the same humility, sweeping away not floors anymore, but the arrogance and complexity that often clouded judgment in boardrooms. And for Ethan, the moment that could have been the end of his empire became the turning point of his life. Not just because his company was saved, but because he discovered that the true wealth of leadership lies not in how much you know, but in how deeply you are willing to listen. So, when 12 consultants walked away, defeated by complexity, it wasn't the brilliance of experts that saved the day. It was the courage of a young janitor who dared to speak, and a CEO who dared to listen. And in that simple exchange, a business was saved, a future was secured, and a friendship was born that neither of them would ever forget. Because sometimes, the most powerful solutions come not from the top of the ladder, but from the bottom. And sometimes, the person holding the mop is the one holding the key to everything. Would you like me to also craft this into a ready-to-use narrated YouTube script, with pacing, pauses, and emotional emphasis cues so it flows perfectly in video voiceover?